You are listening to The Hero's Journey. I'm Dan Zarzana.
I'm Jeff Garvin.
Let the journey begin. This episode of The Hero's Journey is made possible by generous support from listeners like you, and you,
and you,
and you. Visit patreon.com/heroesjourney to learn how you can support the show and gain access to bonus audio and video content, and vote on the subject of our next episode.
Dan?
Yes?
We have a new party member.
Great! Oh, we're gonna need more lembas bread. There's a Trader Joe's on Riverside. I can be right back.
Wait, they have lembas bread at Trader Joe's?
I assume.
If they don't,
where else would you go?
Someone should make that.
That's the plate. Or Whole Foods. Maybe that's at Whole Foods.
Yeah, but if it's Whole Foods, no one can afford that. Not even Gandalf. Jeffrey Scott is our new patron. Thank you for your support. We know there are a million podcasts out there, probably literally a million.
Literally a million.
And most of them need listener support. So we are humbled and grateful that you have chosen to support The Hero's Journey.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeffrey, and welcome to the journey. You are now a mentor.
Ooh, he went straight to mentor.
Went to mentor,
Nice
which
move.
means, Jeffrey, you not only have exclusive access to bonus audio content associated with each episode, but you can also vote on the subject of a future episode.
Strong move. Went straight to mentor. Thank you to demigod patrons, Dean Ethington and John Peterson Jr., and to all our sponsors, including Jeffrey Scott. And thank you all for joining us for this episode, 310 to Yuma.
Yeehaw!
Getting up, doggies!
You say the sheriff is near? Woo-woo! There's a snake in my boot. Okay. 310 to Yuma was released September 7th, 2007 by Lionsgate and is a remake of a 1957 film, which was based on a short story by Elmore Leonard.
What?
Crime fiction author Elmore Leonard. This modern version of the film was directed by James Mangold, who also directed the Academy Award-winning Johnny Cash epic Walk the Line, as well as the excellent and gritty superhero film Logan.
I could not believe that was the same guy, but then I realized that both of those films, people are just filthy the whole movie, so maybe he likes filth.
He likes dirty people.
Yeah.
Yuma stars Russell Crowe and Christian Bale and received 2 Academy Award nominations, Best Achievement in Sound Mixing and the economically named Best Achievement in Music Written for Motion Pictures, Original Score.
In addition to the 2 top shelf leads, this film includes a great supporting cast, including Ben Foster, who I absolutely love in this movie.
He's great.
He is just the perfect addition to a gritty Western.
Yeah. With
his sort of tender, loving sociopathy. Gretchen Mol, who is just the perfect wife in this movie. Alan Tudyk, rapidly becoming one of my favorite actors. Dallas Roberts, Logan Lerman, Kevin Durand, and the now late Peter Fonda, who passed away 9 days ago as of this recording.
Yeah.
R.I.P. Peter, and our condolences to the Fonda family.
Certainly. 310 to Yuma spent its first week as the #1 film at the box office, unseating Rob Zombie's Halloween remake.
Yeah.
Also, in 2007, just to put a little perspective on other events, J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows disapparated off of store shelves.
Wow.
NASA launched the Phoenix Mars lander, and 3 months prior to the release of this film, a world-changing event occurred. Do you recall, Jeff, what it was?
2007. I don't know.
The iPhone was released.
Oh my God.
The very first iPhone. So
I'm not okay with you like adding historical facts to a movie that came out in 2007. I'm not prepared for that at all. I saw an ad for a classic car show the other day and it was like everything 1988 and prior. And I was like, oh my God, my 1987 Sentra could be in the classic car show.
It's old enough.
Enough stalling. Saddle up, gather up your posse, and let's hit the trail. We gotta get to the train station so we can catch the 310 to Yuma.
Yeehaw! We'll have to add sound effects. It's not a laser gun. They're not using Star Trek pistols.
Act 1. begins with the ordinary world, or world of common day. We see our main character in his status quo normal life. Dan Evans is a desperately poor Arizona cattle rancher. He is a veteran sharpshooter who lost his leg in the Civil War and moved west to provide a drier climate for his ill son. He is deep in debt to his landlord, Hollander, who wants to sell his ranch to the railroad. His wife, Alice, a.k.a. Gretchen Mole, second guesses his every decision. His eldest son, William, treats him with unveiled contempt. In fact, the only one who seems to love and admire Dan is his youngest son, Mark, who is sick with tuberculosis. On the night we meet Dan, Hollander has sent his men, including Tucker, played brilliantly by Kevin Durant. I mean,
he's wonderfully obnoxious and hateable.
It's hard to believe that that's a performance. He's the a-hole from high school who never got over himself and ended up in law enforcement.
Totally. Oh, no, he's not a law enforcement.
Oh, that's true. He's like
just a thug.
He's a thug, yeah.
He's a land office thug. That's it.
Hollander has sent his men, including Tucker, to burn down Evans's barn in order to scare him into giving up his land. I would call that world of common day.
Oh, wow. Okay. You pulled up short a little bit.
Oh, yeah?
I think that riding into town the following morning with his boys to demand that Hollander pay for a new barn was part of the world of common day as well.
Sure. I mean, to me, the status quo, the world of common day is just the picture of his status quo, doesn't necessarily include events, but I would agree that's part of his...
Oh, okay.
That's part of his deal.
So on the way to Bisbee the following morning, Dan Evans and his two sons are driving the herd, and Dan's goal is to get to Bisbee and storm into Hollander's office and demand restitution.
Right.
On the way, they witness Ben Wade and his gang rob a stagecoach that is carrying payroll dollars for the Southern Pacific Railroad.
What a sequence that is.
Yeah.
Them catching up to the wagon and then stagecoach and it flipping over. It's essentially a car chase, Western style.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you can't have a Western without some kind of a stagecoach and or train robbery.
Yeah. It was great to see those classic elements using modern technology to make them happen.
Ben Wade and his men notice Dan Evans and his two sons watching. Wade is not heartless, though. He could easily gun down the three of them and move on with his day, but instead he just confiscates their horses.
And their gun.
And their weapons and their horses, and leaves them on the road to Bisbee. This forces Evans and his boys to walk, so it gives Ben Wade and his gang time.
We've just seen Ben Wade one of his men shoot but not kill the bounty hunter played by Henry Fonda, but
Peter Fonda.
Sorry, Peter Fonda, but
Gary Busey, Jake Busey.
Clearly I've got some daddy issues. Anyway, but it's the member of his crew who opens the stagecoach without checking and allows one of the guys inside to start firing. Ben Wade kills his own man. He shoots his own man. And so we see this strange morality that Ben Wade has, where he'll shoot his own man, but he won't kill an innocent rancher, even though that rancher witnessed a stagecoach robbery. So there's some kind of code there.
It's a strange code of honor.
Early in the story, we see how much contempt Dan's teenage son has for Dan, because Dan's not standing up for himself and being tough. He's very much go with the flow. At least, wants to protect his family, so he's not being tough. He's being very calculated and wise, but he's not standing up and fighting. And the son is maybe going through some teenage stuff, but he's also, I'm never going to walk in your shoes, Dad. And in that moment, when Wade stops them and says, I'm going to need your horses, there's this moment where you can see the son be like, oh, here we go. Dad's going to just give up again. But Dan does say,
those are my cattle. I want them back.
Careful, Rancher. That's Ben Wade you're talking to.
Well, I need them back. They're all I got.
But he gives up his gun and his horses.
Sure.
You can see
he's not an idiot.
Right.
He's not like, no, Ben Wade, you give me I'm going to fight you right here and now. Of course, he's not a fool.
But we start to see this tension between William, his son's expectations and hopes for the kind of role model and father Dan would be, and how William almost kind of admires how bad Ben Wade is and how he takes what he wants. And that's that first scene where we really start to get to that emotional, that tasty emotional core. And of
Yes.
course, Campbell is all about the relationships between fathers and sons and temptation. So this scene, as I was watching this movie again, was really where I started to go, oh, we got some mythological father conflict coming.
Yeah. So all of this gets us toward the call to adventure, where the hero is presented with a challenge which renders him unable to continue living in the comfort of the ordinary world.
Right.
Now, Dan Evans does not live in comfort, as we
No.
see. His ranch house is run down.
Yeah.
As you said, he owes money. But as Dan Evans and his sons finally make their way to Bisbee, having recovered their horses, as Ben Wade promised,
Right.
he left them on the side of the road for them to find.
Yeah.
So there's that twisted code of honor there.
Yeah.
As the three of them arrive in Bisbee, they get there just as the sheriff is surrounding the saloon to prepare to capture Ben Wade, who has kind of foolishly hung around a little too long to spend some quality time with a lady.
Right.
I'm forgetting something. I'm forgetting something very critical here,
Right.
which is Dan Evans marches into the land office and tells Hollander, "You owe me. You didn't have any right to burn down my barn. You've also dammed up the stream that runs through my land."
Right.
And Hollander says, "Stream runs through my land first, so I can do whatever I want with it.
Yeah.
And, you'd better pay me in a week or I'm selling your land to the railroad."
Right.
Then
Yes.
we notice that the sheriff and his men are surrounding the saloon. So
Right.
Dan's going to bust in there with his shotgun. What was his plan there? To kill Hollander?
I think that
He was almost coming a little unhinged.
Yeah, I think this was a breaking point with Dan, and I think that Ben Wade taking his horses and his gun in front of his son, and then he begs Hollander.
Yeah, well, he offers his wife's brooch.
Yeah, after Tucker knocks him down.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
So he's
on his butt
humiliated
in
now.
the dirt.
Yeah.
And he's like holding out in a very begging gesture this brooch that his wife has, which is probably the only precious thing that she owns.
Yeah.
It's a very low moment for him. And he says,
I can turn the corner.
Sometimes a man has to be big enough to see how small he is.
and this almost breaks Dan Evans. He goes to his horse, grabs his shotgun, he storms into the saloon, screaming out Hollander's name, and Ben Wade is there.
Right.
And they have this really great conversation.
So good.
You got your horses back, didn't you? And your cattle?
Yeah, I got my horses back, but you killed two of my herd.
Hell, they died for a good cause. I tell you what. That should cover it. How much you get for a day's work?
$2. Wanna hire out?
Well, there's $2 for half a day.
You took up my boy's time, too.
You're right. I did. Anything else you want to get paid for, Dan?
You can give me $5 extra
And what's that for?
for making me nervous.
This movie, just to take a slight sidebar to talk about the structure of movies and movie tropes, this is a Western, but it is also, in a very twisted way, a buddy film. In the way that Midnight Run is a buddy film, where these two, it's the hate you turns into a friendship, they change each other. And this scene is such a great scene. Man, and I honestly, Russell Crowe is hit or miss for me. Sometimes I think he's growly and surly. But in this picture, his strength really comes out. Yeah. And he and Christian Bale are having so much fun acting with each other. And, who can be tougher and more gravelly. and they kind of make each other laugh throughout the movie. Their relationship was so satisfying. I had forgotten how great this movie is. This is a great movie.
Yeah.
And their performances, especially in the scenes like that, are just the linchpin of what makes this movie work.
So while this little payoff is happening, Dan Evans is actually stalling, so the sheriff and his men can sneak into the saloon, and then they arrest Ben Wade. And Mr. Butterfield, representative from the Southern Pacific Railroad, states that they are going to take Ben Wade to contention, put him on the 310 to Yuma, have a quick trial in federal court, and then they're going to hang him in public to make an example of Ben Wade.
Gonna hang him in the morning.
And ask for volunteers. Dan Evans volunteers, but for $200.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of money back then in 1884. So Butterfield actually agrees to it. So that call for volunteers to escort Ben Wade to contention.
Yeah.
That's the call.
Agreed. Which brings us to refusal of the call. This is when the hero is confronted with his fear of the unknown and refuses to engage in the adventure. Sometimes the hero expresses this energy himself, and sometimes the energy of refusal is expressed outside. Dan doesn't refuse the call at all. He is desperate.
Right.
And he sees this as maybe his last shot to keep his to keep his land and save his family. The strongest expression of refusal I see is from Dan's wife, Alice, and it happens a little bit later in the movie than you might expect. Marshal Weathers sends the posse. They're not really a posse, but he sends the gang of guards that are going to escort Wade. They send him to Dan's ranch, and they do a little switcheroo so that when the stagecoach heads off, they've switched hats. Wade is actually still at Dan's ranch while a decoy goes off in the stagecoach so that Charlie and his gang will follow the stagecoach. So there's a great scene where they have dinner together, and Wade is flirting with Dan's wife, and he does a couple kind of like humiliation power plays on Dan. He's seducing everyone in that room, his son, his wife. This movie does such a great job of setting up the stakes of the main character, what they want, what they need, and what's at risk. And after dinner, Alice has a scene with Dan in their bedroom, and Alice tells Dan,
"You can change your mind, Dan. No one will think less of you."
No one can think less of me.
and he tries to reassure her. He paints a picture of how everything will be better in 6 months. And he turns around and he can see in her face that she's doubting that he can pull this off. And he says, "You think it's too much for me?" And she just says, "What are you thinking?" And he says,
"If I don't go, we gotta pack up and leave. And God knows we're without a prayer dirt poor. I'm tired, Alice. I am tired of watching my boys go hungry. I'm tired of the way that they look at me. I'm tired of the way that you don't. I've been standing on one leg for 3 damn years, waiting for God to do me a favor. And he ain't listening."
It's the most desperate, honest, like cut through all the pretense moment. And this whole scene is whispered.
Yes.
So he doesn't even have the pitch of his voice to communicate that desperation. It's all just whispered. He's in a tiny room. Wade's in the next room. This can't be heard. It's just this brilliant writing, brilliant performance. And we get that Dan has no choice. So Alice is the strongest expression of refusal.
All right, moving on to meeting with the mentor. Joseph Campbell called this segment Supernatural Aid, where the hero receives unexpected assistance that comes to one who has undertaken his proper adventure. This segment, to me, was a little difficult, only because I struggled with allowing myself to see Ben Wade as a mentor character for Dan.
Yeah.
But I think that's what he is.
Yeah.
He's a very complex character. He's the villain.
Yeah.
If you're looking at it as a white hat and black hat Western, which this isn't.
Right.
But he also is a mentor. And then throughout the film, he shapeshifts into, he toes the line of ally by the end of the film.
Yeah.
So in this particular case, acting as a mentor, I would say, is the first night after the group has left the Evans Ranch and they're camping outside.
Mm-hmm. Ben
Wade is asking Dan, "What are you doing here? You've got one, you're a wounded veteran. You've got a family to protect. You don't belong here. You're not with the railroad, so you don't have any kind of, this isn't an occupational thing for you where you're trying to protect your company. You're not a Pinkerton, so you're not a paid bounty hunter who earns $18 a day to do this kind of work. What are you doing? Go home." And then he kind of goads Dan into losing his cool by saying some insulting things about Alice. I'll bet she was a pretty girl before she met you. And you kind of ruined her.
All of which
are
probably true, which is why it sets him off so much.
That's why Dan loses it. Yeah. Again. I guess I just saw that scene as almost a test for Dan. Like, what are you really in this for?
I agree that
I don't know.
I agree that Ben Wade is the mentor, but this whole film is a mentor story. So to call one scene meeting with the mentor doesn't really work. And
Right.
I also think that supernatural aid,
Not applicable.
yeah, I mean, you really have to stretch it to find a, there's no, he gives him a gun or he gives him a knife and
Yeah.
that's the weapon.
Yeah,
But,
there is no special tool provided.
but as we will lay out as we go through the rest of this movie, Dan couldn't accomplish his goal without the help of his adversary, which is a very special kind of aid,
yeah.
which you could kind of call supernatural. Anyway, Wade's gun, his revolver with the cross
Yep.
on the grip,
Yeah.
it plays a significant role in this movie. You could maybe nod that as the supernatural aid.
Well,
At the very end,
Sure.
anyway,
yeah, the hand of God is the name of that pistol.
right.
Supernatural, that was Joseph Campbell's term, and that's because his analysis and his study was all about ancient mythology and religious stories where the supernatural aid, the mentor, is a fae character or an angel or something appearing before the hero and literally extending, like a magical sword or something
Right.
to the hero and then disappearing again.
Yeah.
So that in the work that Campbell reviewed when he was constructing this entire
Paradigm,
framework, that is where that comes from. So in modern storytelling, sometimes that doesn't work exactly in that framework, but
we don't talk a lot about Freud on this podcast, but Campbell's thoughts on this whole subject were very influenced by Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud. So his view of mythology and religion was seen through a lens of, at the time, what was considered the cutting edge of psychological philosophy. And Freud had some interesting ideas about fathers and the subconscious. And I think you can see that relationship playing out between them. The broken father, the missing limb as a symbol of brokenness. This brings us to crossing the threshold. The hero passes a barrier and enters the special world. And the crossing represents the hero's commitment to taking on this adventure. After Dan agrees to join the party of men escorting Wade to the train in contention, they pass through the saloon doors and step out onto the street. This is a classic Western image, those saloon doors banging open. In fact, when Wade and his gang enter the saloon, it's such a great little moment. Wade pushes through the doors and Charlie slips in right before they close.
Oh, I didn't.
It's great.
Catch
the
that.
doors open and Charlie steps in just right as they're closing, and
Yeah.
then the rest of the gang comes in. And it's such a great, Charlie clearly hero worships Wade and,
Oh, sure.
and has some kind of relationship with him that's unrealized. Whether it's romantic or not is left to the imagination of the viewer.
No, there's something analogous. There's a father-son
There's that
symbolic relationship
those-
between the two of them too, I think.
daddy issues again.
Although what you
It's-
just said about
There's some. I think
you
there's
think?
some. Oh yeah. It's all under the surface. I would say there's elements of that in Ben Foster's performance. Some of the ways that he looks at Wade during that movie. But this is a total sidebar because crossing of the threshold. So that's what I love about being on this podcast with you, Dan, is we can take every tributary and always come back to the structure of the hero's journey. So Dan agrees to join the party. The whole gang pushes through the saloon doors out onto the street, and all of a sudden, Charlie Prince comes riding down Main Street.
This town's gonna burn!
He kills 2 men, and the posse starts taking shots at him. Dan raises his rifle and draws a bead on Charlie as Charlie's riding out of town. Dan was a sharpshooter in the Union Army.
right.
And now he's a sharpshooter again. This is his crossing of the threshold. He is taking up arms against the gang for the first time. He doesn't fire, but he draws a bead. And you see him looking down the barrel of his gun, and then he stops. And that's that little moment where you're like, oh, his soldier instincts are kicking in. So to me, that moment is his crossing the threshold, where he is now an active hunter. He is defending this party.
That's good. I glossed right over that. I thought that him agreeing to host Ben Wade and the group that night and, allow the stagecoach switcheroo to happen on his land, because that puts his entire family in jeopardy.
For sure.
Because he knows Charlie Prince is watching. In fact, they want Charlie Prince to be there watching this happen.
Right.
So I thought that was a crossing of the first threshold. But no, you're right. That scene of them exiting the saloon, that's a much better representation. That night, the dinner and all that stuff, that's maybe even a first test.
This is a great Hollywood movie, but I love how un-Hollywood this first act is. There's so much stuff in this first act, because normally you'd get the sort of heroes, setup, but then we cut away and we've got all this stuff with Wade and his relationship with the gang and the girl and his relationship with Fonda and the bounty hunter.
Yeah.
So you really get almost equal screen time of those two guys for the first act, maybe a little bit more in Dan's favor, but you really meet both of these guys. You don't get a lot of deep villain stuff in the first act of most movies. You really don't. And this is a great example of how it works when you do.
I particularly enjoyed these moments with Ben Wade. The very first moment we see him, he's drawing a sketch of a bird sitting on a branch. And then later on, when they get to contention and he seduces the woman working at the saloon, and then they go upstairs and he's drawing her like one of his French girls. And so you see this, there's this artistic sensitivity to Ben Wade, in addition to this bizarre code of honor that he has. He's not a mustache twirling villain.
Right.
He's a complex character. I have to credit James Mangold for saying this, but he is not a guy who wakes up in the morning and says, what evil can I do today? He's just living his life the way he knows how.
Yeah.
And it just happens that it's on the other side of the law.
And he is not a sociopath.
No.
Well, there's so much to say about it. Sorry. Well, that brings us to the end of Act 1.
Wow.
We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with Act 2. We are live.
Checking.
Check.
La 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 la.
Yep, we're good.
The hanging of me will be done by them in the morning. I don't know why I find the passive voice so amusing. I love converting things into passive voice.
Yes, you do.
We normally don't have a beverage break until after Act 2.
That's right.
But that's also because we normally record in the morning.
Yeah.
Before we see the sun.
That's true, but I played a very late show in Newport Beach last night and got home at 3 a.m., so you mercifully changed the schedule with us so we can record later.
We shifted our call time to afternoon. It is now nearly 2 p.m.
Wow.
So we're going to do a little mini beverage break.
Bonus drinking.
Because hero-level patron Scott sent us a gift.
That's right.
What is this, Jeff? Explain to me.
What
is this golden elixir?
This is Jack Daniel's Tennessee whiskey, but it is 100 years old. This whiskey is from the early 20th century, before our grandparents were alive.
Yeah. Yes.
When our friend Scott's mom passed away, he went to go clear out her house and he found this bottle, and he has very generously shared some of it with us. So we are going to taste it on microphone. What do you think of the color?
It is a kind of a pale gold.
If you look at the very surface of it, it's almost a goldenrod, and then it gets darker underneath. I would say this seems lighter than regular old Jack Daniels.
It probably fades in color with time, I would think.
You think?
I wish we had proper whiskey glasses.
Oh, those little.
I mean, these are rocks glasses.
Yeah.
But the Glencairns that really funnel I'm gonna have to kind of create a funnel with my hands to get
I'm gonna do that too. Dan is cupping his hands over the whiskey as though he's taking a hit from a bag full of spray paint.
Yeah, but don't inhale too much because then you'll pass out.
To me, it smells more like a bourbon. There's a honey overtone to the nose.
Wow.
I smell honey and vanilla.
It's such a mild scent, If I stick my nose in a glass of whiskey and inhale like I just did, normally it just burns all the nose hairs out of my head. But this is a really pleasant, soft scent.
Yeah. Incidentally, I've been waxing the inside of my nose so I don't have that problem when I smell whiskey.
What?
Yeah.
Why?
Just get a little bit of wax and then yank
Why?
it right out. I'm just kidding. Dan.
Oh.
Okay. Jesus. All right, let's drink this.
Oh my God, why would you do that to me? All right, I'm going to take a sip of this. You talk too much. Wow.
Right?
That is honey.
Yeah.
Super, super honey on that.
Oh, and you can just feel it on your tongue.
Yeah.
It's got to burn down the throat, though.
A little.
No doubt it's got to burn, but it's...
Oh, really? Because I was going to say the opposite, that it doesn't burn as bad as younger whiskeys that I have.
I wonder if you and I will ever have the same experience of drinking something ever.
Wow. 100 years old. I wasn't even born yet.
Our grandparents weren't born. My grandparents weren't born until the late 20s.
Think about this movie takes place in approximately 1884. That means that possibly the people who were involved in the barreling and the distilling of the liquid that is in this glass right now maybe were being born in 1884 when this movie takes place.
What a great take. Thank you, Scott,
Yes.
for this delicious whiskey tasting experience.
Patron Scott.
Here's to Scott.
Scott. Wow. All right. Well, as we savor this, one way to slow our drinking will be to talk.
Yeah.
So tell rookie patron Jeffrey Scott what you have been reading and watching and playing this last month.
I finished Bosch Season 5.
Thank goodness. What did you think?
I loved it.
Yeah.
The series is neo-noir. Some of that energy is in the books, but they've really taken the noir, dark Los Angeles to a new level, and they tackle the opioid crisis in this season. And that second to last episode where Bosch is on a plane and does extraordinary things blew my mind.
Yeah.
And then the next episode, the relationship with his daughter and the final frame. I'm a sucker for pets, and Bosch is such a stoic guy, and there's a dog relationship, and I cried at the end of the season. I wept as I was watching that episode. I was so moved. I'm currently reading 2 books. I'm listening to the audiobook of The Marsh King's Daughter by Karen Dion.
Okay.
It's a psychological thriller about a girl who grew up in the marsh with her father and mother, never saw anybody but her parents till age 12. Her father was a kidnapper who notoriously abducted a young girl to make her his wife. So she was raised by a kidnapper and his victim. So we meet this girl as an adult, and her father has just escaped from prison. She goes to hunt down her escaped convict father, and then their past is revealed in flashbacks. It's gripping.
Neat.
And then I am reading This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Motar and Max Gladstone. This is a far future sci-fi epistolary novel.
For people like me who have to look up the word epistolary now,
a novel,
what does that mean?
A novel told in letters or correspondence.
Okay.
So there are 2 agents, one named Red and one named Blue, and they work for opposed factions that exist in the future who send agents back in time to try and alter events so that one faction or the other will win.
Wow.
And be in charge. One faction is called Garden, and they are very organic and crunchy feely, and I forget what the other faction is called, but they're much more militant and technology driven. The first letter that Red receives says burn before reading, and it's basically a taunt, like ah ha ha, I got one up on you and I altered the past better than you did. And it goes back and forth, and they start to develop this relationship in time. And there are different strands and different braids of time that they're moving between. It's sci-fi because of the setting, but they don't get into the technology of how it works. I've never read anything like it. Could not recommend it highly enough. It just came out, I want to say, in July, and it's extraordinary.
Time travel is so difficult to do well because it's so easy to pick apart. You know, people just, shred movies like Back to the Future for that kind of thing. But are you either finding yourself enjoying this so much that you're not even tempted to do that? Or is this written so well that you're not catching things like that and going, oh, well, that couldn't have been?
It's just not about that.
Okay.
You're
selling me on this. I want to read this.
You never get a grip on what events exactly they're trying to change. It's just this ongoing time war. And it's
wow,
absolutely gripping.
What's the title again?
This Is How You Lose the Time War.
Okay.
So that's what I've been reading, watching, playing.
Very cool.
How about you, Dan? What have you been watching, reading, and playing?
I had a sick day. Well, a couple of sick days recently. And when I was home from work, I just kind of plopped myself on the couch with a Dayquil cocktail and just watched whatever was on TV, and a lot of forgettable stuff. But one of the films that was on, and remember, Dayquil cocktail, so take this with a grain of salt. It's a film called Battle Los Angeles. Basically, Independence Day meets Black Hawk Down.
Wow.
Aaron Eckhart plays a high-ranking military officer. I don't remember if he's Army or Marines or something, but anyway, he's about to retire, and aliens invade Earth. It's about his units travel through the city to reach a particular destination.
That rad.
That's kind of the Black Hawk Downness of it. I really, really enjoyed it. Michelle Rodriguez is in it. Michael Pena. So if you like sci-fi, if the elevator pitch of Independence Day meets Black Hawk Down, if that intrigues you, check out Battle Los Angeles. I had a really great time with it. I also read some stuff. Trunk Music, which is Bosch Book 5.
Wow, I haven't read that one.
Really enjoyed it. I'm digging the Bosch novels.
It's so good.
I read a book called Theft of Swords by Michael J. Sullivan. It is, I guess I would say, good entry-level fantasy.
Huh.
It doesn't have all of the complex political stuff that's in A Song of Ice and Fire. It's not real heavy on deep, deep history and lore like a Tolkien. It is these two guys, they're mercenaries, they're just trying to get by, and so they get hired out to do a job. Of course, the job goes wrong. I really enjoyed it. It's fun. Sullivan is a fun writer. There's a lot of humor in it. So that was Theft of Swords. Then I read Armada by Ernest Cline.
Oh, yeah.
Which is exceptionally meh.
Yeah.
Yeah, really disappointed. I enjoyed it, but I don't know how much of my enjoyment of it was me wanting to enjoy it more than I was enjoying it. The story feels rushed. This is the second novel by the author who wrote Ready Player One. So I feel like a lot of the references, the pop culture 80s references and things, they brought that back, but it just seems shoehorned in. The conversations where characters are using these pop culture references, they don't seem natural. Like, you and I are the same kind of geek that these characters are.
Right.
But we don't construct our conversations around these references. It's like their entire conversation, it just seems unreal.
I had the same experience, but I read Armada while I was writing the first book after Symptoms that then didn't get accepted by the publisher. So I had all this compassion for Ernest Cline trying to write a second novel after having written Ready Player One, which is an enormous breakout hit. Imagine your publisher saying, give us another Ready Player One. You can't. There's no possible way.
And I feel like the publisher, because this felt so rushed, particularly the end, it seemed like he had a deadline. There was no wiggle room on that deadline, and you got to get it done and just poop out another Ready Player One. Well, and that's what it was. And it was just disappointing. And I really feel for the guy because that book came out several years ago, and I don't know if he's working on a third one or what, but he hasn't published anything since then. So I'm sure he's writing something, but
sophomore books are really hard, especially when you had a crazy high concept debut. Like, it's just so hard. How would you write a follow-up?
Finally, I read a book called Agent Zigzag by Ben McIntyre, which is a true story about a British low-life criminal who becomes a double agent during World War II. He's in prison on the Isle of Jersey. The Nazis invade and occupy the island, and he says, if you let me out, I will spy for Germany on England. I'm amazed that this is a true story. I don't understand how this guy got away with what he got away with. It's amazing. Wow. Agent Zigzag. Are we moving on then? That was a very abrupt change there.
Yeah, it's been like 30 minutes of this segment. So let's sip our water, maybe refresh our coffees, and we'll be back with Act 2.
Act 2 begins with The Road of Trials, which I think is a pretty appropriate title this time.
Amen.
Literally, they are on a road between Bisbee to Contention. Vogler also calls this Test's allies and enemies.
I love that.
Once having crossed the threshold, the hero meets allies, makes enemies, and must pass a series of tests to prove their worthiness. The allies, the little party, the posse, they're not a posse, like you said. They're just a group of dudes. There's Mr. Butterfield, played by Dallas Roberts. Mr. Butterfield is the representative of the Southern Pacific Railroad. His company has been plagued by Ben Wade and his gang, and he wants Ben Wade to pay.
Dallas went to Juilliard, and it shows because he is so good at this role. He's one of those actors where you just believe he's the guy who works for the railroad, like
sure.
Who works for the stagecoach company.
He disappeared in this role.
He's such a good actor.
For a period of time, the Pinkerton Byron McElroy, played by Peter Fonda.
Oh, so crusty and bloody and good
in
this movie.
Yeah. This is a guy who's been through some stuff. I mean, as Ben Wade approaches him during the stagecoach holdup, he says, "Oh, Byron, I see your hair's turned gray." So these two guys have known each other for a while. They've been adversaries.
Yeah.
Doc Potter, played by Alan Tudyk. He was fantastic in this. Will, Dan Evans' oldest son. Will wants to come with the group. He wants to help escort Ben Wade to contention. But his father says, "Nope, I need you at home. You're staying home." And Will defies his father and tracks the group, and it's a good thing too.
Right.
The enemies are Ben Wade, his lieutenant Charlie Prince, and the rest of the gang.
Charlie Prince is my favorite character in this movie.
This film, I didn't know who Ben Foster was until this film, and I sat up and took notice. I thought, this guy's really good. He is frighteningly calm through most of what he does. Even when he's gunning people down, he's just cool as a cucumber, and that is what's terrifying about Charlie Prince. And
he is so against type. He's got this sort of high-pitched, soft voice and this almost effeminate quality. He's very fashion conscious. He's got
the most stylish costume of anybody. Like Ben Wade, he's got a nice costume, but he looks like he's just spent some money on some nice clothes. He's got a nice vest, and his hat is really cool. Charlie Prince,
he's got a look.
Yeah, he's like a pop star. He's got
Lady
style.
Gaga helped him pick his.
Absolutely,
it's like post Civil War army chic. I will say that maybe second only to Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday, Ben Foster is my favorite modern Western character.
Tests.
Well, did you say enemies? You started to talk about enemies.
I mean, we just spent 10 minutes talking about Charlie Prince's clothes.
So good.
So, yeah, that's an enemy. The rest of Ben Wade's gang as well, too, they have names, but really what's important is Ben and Charlie. Those are the two.
Would you put where would you put Tucker? I guess he's kind of a shapeshifter because he's on the right side, but he's a jackass.
No, he's
enemy.
No, I guess I'd stick him as an enemy. He's just a putz.
Yeah.
He's got no interest in doing the right thing. The only reason he's a part of this gang that's taking Ben Wade to contention is because his boss told him to do it.
Yeah, he's such a punk. So good. His performance is so good.
I just want to wring his neck.
Well, the way I figured it, is I'd be asleep in my own bed right now if it weren't for you. So if I gotta be up, well then, you're damn well gonna be up with me too, Ben Wade. They're gonna hang me in the morning before the night is done. Hang me in the morning, never see the sun.
And he's got this, you're gonna bleep this because you have to, but eating grin while he is singing to Ben Wade to keep him awake.
Yeah.
While he's going to hang me in the morning, and he's just smiling because he's like, I'm keeping you awake, you son of a gun. I'm happy about it.
You just want to stab him in the neck with a fork over and over again.
Yeah, 27 times. That's what you want to do. Can we move on to tests?
I'm so sorry.
Has this 100-year-old whiskey affected us a little more than we thought? It was just an ounce apiece.
I love this movie so much, and there's so many sidebars. Like, how do you?
It really is. It really is. Like you said, this movie is juicy. There's so much to it.
If you're listening to this podcast because you like it and you haven't seen this movie, do yourself a favor. It's so good.
Tests, boy. I mean, we talked about the dinner scene.
Totally.
I think the dinner scene is a test,
yes.
Especially the cutting of the steak. Dan loses that one. Ben plays Dan like a fiddle.
Oh, why, thank you, Dan. That would be pleasant and kind of you. Much appreciated. You can cut that out for me. Oh, can you cut the fat off there? I don't particularly like the fat at all. You just take that out. And the gristle. I don't like the gristle.
And then we also talked about Ben goading Dan into losing his cool when he talks about if
I was lucky enough to have a wife like Alice. I treat her a whole lot better than you do, Dan. I'd feed her better, buy her pretty dresses. Wouldn't make her work so hard. Yeah, I'll bet Alice was a real pretty girl before she married you.
Shut up about my wife. You shut up about her. You say one more word, I'll cut you down right here. Right here.
I like this side of you, Dan.
Dan loses that one.
Yep.
Ben just has Dan's number. All the while, he is corrupting Will, because he sees that Will looks up to him.
He wants that power.
He thinks Ben Wade is cool. The following day, Wade's gang has caught up with the decoy coach.
Yes.
And in this really brutal scene, Charlie Prince gets the information out of the Deputy Crawley.
Where is he?
Open the door. Open the door. Let me out of here, goddammit.
Where did they take him?
I don't know.
Mister, you better tell me where they took him, or you will burn.
They know that they've headed the wrong direction. They've been tricked. And Dan poses the suggestion, let's go through Apache country. It's a shortcut, but really dangerous.
Yeah.
After some back and forth discussion and argument, especially Ben Wade, he's like, you don't want to go through Apache country. But Byron McElroy, watching Wade's gang bear down on them from the distance, he says, we'll take our chances with the Apache. Yeah. That says a lot about what McElroy feels about Wade's gang. Like, I would rather invade Apache country and risk being slaughtered by them than face Ben Wade's gang.
And just to be clear, it's U.S. government property. The Apache that are in it are the ones who defied being moved out. So they're the badasses that didn't leave, you know, when the government tried to shoo them out. One tiny plot point, the only nit I have to pick with this movie is that what did they think was going to happen when Charlie Prince caught up to the stagecoach? Like, they knew he was going to catch up eventually. What? That poor guy and the driver, they were dead all along.
They locked him in.
They were going to be... So that I thought that was the one thing where it's like, wow, that was an epic fail.
So as they ride through Apache country, Ben Wade overpowers and then kills Byron by chucking him off a cliff. And very nearly escapes when Will, who has been trailing the group the whole time in defiance of his father, appears and rescues the situation. You're looking at me like this is part of your inmost cave.
This is my approach.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. We're kind of close because I've got one more.
Okay.
So at this point, with Byron dead, Dan Evans sort of becomes the leader of the group. Nobody else asserts any kind of leadership. Certainly not Mr. Butterfield, who I expected to be the one because this is his group. He's the one paying for it.
I need a new corporal. You're it until you're dead or I find somebody better.
Exactly. That night, Ben is enticing William with stories of the pleasures of Dodge City, further driving a wedge between Will and his father, Dan. Dan then asks Ben Wade to remind everybody how many men he's killed, how many families he's destroyed. And when Ben Wade says quite a few, he looks remorseful.
Yeah.
For a very brief moment. And then he brags about dynamiting an entire train full of prospectors. And as everybody else looks at Ben Wade in horror, the camera refocuses on William. Mm-hmm. And William is smiling. He's amused by this story of atrocity that Ben Wade has committed. He's continuing to be seduced and impressed by this villainous character because he's, is a strong man. He takes what he wants, and he's a male figure to look up to, unlike his father, who he still sees as weak. That, to me, reaches the end of the tests. Did that bleed into your approach to the Inmost Cave?
Absolutely. To me, the ride through Apache country is the approach to the Inmost Cave. This is, let's go to the Death Star. Everything from Dan saying, I know a shortcut, until William shows up and gets the jump on Wade.
Yeah.
That's my approach.
That's the approach.
That's my approach, yeah.
I feel like our ordeal might be the same thing.
Might be.
But how long we have extended the segment of Approach to the Inmost Cave might be different. I mean, you stated what the Inmost Cave is, where the Inmost Cave... Well, you go ahead, say the...
What? Oh.
What the...
I forgot to introduce
what the statement
approach...
of the Inmost Cave.
Oh, man, are we going to have to reverse and insert it? So
No, because that was all part of organic conversation.
Yeah, so the approach to the Inmost Cave is when the hero reaches the edge of the dangerous place where his quest is hidden.
I'll just say what mine is, because it's pretty close to where you are.
Okay.
For me, I feel like part of Dan's quest, the literal obvious quest, is get Ben Wade to contention and put him on the 310 to Yuma.
Sure.
But his emotional quest, his personal quest, is to earn the respect of his son. At this point in the story, William vastly more impressed by Ben Wade than he is by his father.
I follow you.
When Dan takes Ben Wade into the brush that night so that Ben can urinate, Ben tells Dan that there's a wildness in William's eyes and it reminds him of him. Dan shoots back that William has a head start on decency and is never going to be like Ben Wade. But there's a wedge there. There's doubt where throughout this journey, Dan is losing control of his oldest son. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that is approaching the Inmost Cave, that place of darkness where he could potentially lose his son permanently if his son is allowed to be completely corrupted by Ben Wade.
Okay.
That's where I'm headed with this.
Got it. Yeah, so your approach extends into my ordeal a little bit.
Let's exchange cards.
Okay.
Deal or ordeal cards.
Deal or
where
ordeal.
Jeff and I have guessed what the opposite has chosen as the ordeal.
I'm going to read your first. Dan and Ben race to the train. Charlie kills Dan. That is not what I chose for the ordeal.
Right.
Okay.
I know that now.
Okay, good.
And you said Daniel faces off with Johnny at the All Valley tournament. Okay, so you're screwing around.
So
that's the Karate Kid, ladies and gentlemen.
So Dan and I were discussing at the break how Deal or Ordeal has kind of lost its point because of two reasons. One, you know, we're having the patrons choose the subject of our next episode, and until this episode, ironically, Dan and I have been very, very in sync with the ordeal on the last 5 or 6 episodes. So it's kind of taken the drama out of doing Deal or Ordeal. So we're looking for a new idea to replace this segment. So I just put the Karate Kid in there as a joke because it's the same protagonist name. And so,
oh dear. The reason I chose that segment for you is I almost picked it myself. Because I felt like for a long time when I was going through this film that there isn't really a real big central crisis at the time I was thinking my initial review of this film.
Okay.
And I thought you were gonna feel the same way, and that this is one of those movies that has a really delayed crisis.
Right.
It's kind of like Harry Potter. That was your breakdown of Harry Potter, is that, you know, there is no Act 3 almost.
Oh,
in the book, or have you since revised
I've revised my thing about Harry Potter. I missed.
Okay, so anyway,
yeah,
the ordeal. Did I say this? The ordeal, where the hero faces the ultimate test, often risking death to overcome their worst fear, sometimes actually appearing to die. What I chose as the ordeal was the Apache attack that night. Dan takes a bullet to the head, grazing him.
Yeah.
And Ben escapes. That sequence is the ordeal. They're camped out in a cave. They're attacked by Apaches at night. Dan is wounded. Ben, contrary to what we think is going to happen, takes Dan's rifle and helps defend the group against the Apache.
Right.
This could have been his opportunity to slink off into the darkness, but he dispatches the Apache and saves the group. And then he demands the keys to the handcuffs as kind of payment for services rendered, and Dan throws the keys into the bushes, and Ben stomps on his face and knocks him out. So that is the knocking unconscious of Dan I saw as the kind of the symbolic, the hero appears to die.
Totally.
And then Vogler calls out, there are some films where the villain will escape in the middle, and that is part of the ordeal, because the hero has lost control of the villain. Perhaps the villain had been captured or something. This is that I felt the same way in The Dark Knight. That's why I said that chase in The Dark Knight was the ordeal.
So that's your ordeal.
That's my ordeal.
So I just want to add a couple things in there that I feel like are thematically and character relevant. While Wade is in the bushes taking a leak and Dan is semi-guarding him, you mentioned the dialogue where Wade is about to say, your son's I saw myself in him, and Dan says he's got a head start on the road to decency. Wade says, that's why I don't mess around with doing anything good, Dan. Right. You do one good deed for somebody, I imagine it's habit forming.
Yep.
Something decent. And you see the grateful look in their eyes, I imagine it makes you feel like Christ himself.
Yep.
And then he does a good deed.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
It's the beginning of that. Oh, he did a good deed, and now he's turned the corner.
Right.
We have atonement with the father in this ordeal, in combination with apotheosis, as Dan realizes he is the better father. And now he's no longer a bodyguard. He's no longer just a member of the crew. Like you said, he has replaced Butterfield. He's the leader. And they said, so what do we do now? And he said, well, as far as I know, there's no reward for getting him halfway to the train.
Right.
So Dan is in charge. Yeah. He's the new leader.
And there's no hesitation there.
Nope.
He comes to, his first words out of his mouth are,
where is he? He's gone.
Took the horses with him. Found us in the grass.
Guess the quickest went out of the pass. We'll be looking for help. Getting his cuffs off.
We're going after him?
Well, there ain't no reward for getting him halfway to that train, is there?
The next sequence is them trying to find Wade to recapture him. They go into this like railroad encampment where they're trying to blast through a mountain to continue the railroad through this pass, right? And there's all these guys working. They are using dynamite to blast through tunnels to get the railroad going. I know that this is part of your next sequence. Here's why it's part of my ordeal. So we've got Walter Bowles, who is some kind of law enforcement. I wasn't really clear. Is he the railroad police? Is he the marshal?
Yeah, no, I don't know. He seemed like, I thought he was the construction foreman or somehow in charge, but he had a badge. Yeah, I don't know what that was all about.
So then you got Luke Wilson, who I love him, but he's so funny that I can't, like, he elevates anything to a comedy. So it was like, that was tonally weird for me.
In this film?
I just have trouble taking him seriously. I don't know why.
Oh.
He's funny, but
because he's not funny in this.
I don't know. He is, man.
You just see him as funny.
He has this one threatening line, and I thought it was kind of funny. Anyway, so they're torturing Wade with electricity, right? They've got like
they got him hooked up to a car battery somehow.
He killed Bowles' brother-in-law. And
brother.
Was it brother?
Yeah, little brother.
They have this standoff when Dan and his crew arrive to take possession of the criminal again, and these guys are saying, we're not giving him up. And there's this sort of standoff moment where it says, well, at least we're going to take our horses. And he goes, I got no problem with that. And then they kind of look at each other, and Doc picks up a shovel and hits the bearded guy. And then violence erupts. They sort of rescue Wade from these two law enforcement officials, and now they are riding away, being chased by these guys, and all of a sudden they're working together.
Right.
Their goal is united because Wade wants to get away, and Dan wants to bring him to justice. So they have this great teamwork moment where Wade throws the dynamite and skeet shoots, and Dan skeet shoots it, and it blows up the tunnel, and they get away. This is great Western explosion stuff. But in the kerfuffle, Doc gets shot and he goes down, and as he's dying,
did we make it? Did we get away?
Yeah, Doc. We did. Thanks to you.
I just have to say, I think Alan Tudyk dies in every film he's in.
I had the same thought this morning. Like, is he the new Sean Bean?
He dies in Rogue One. He dies in Serenity. I just saw him in a play, the Sherlock Holmes play at the Geffen. He dies in that. Like, he dies in everything, and he's such a good. You just immediately love him. You know, he's such a. We haven't talked about his performance a lot, but he's the veterinarian who gets tasked with doing surgery on crusty old Fonda to get the bullet out of us. Anyway,
when Dan Evans said, "Yeah, we got away because of you," you see like a little relief on Doc Potter's face, and then the lights go out. I was so impressed by that. When you see, I mean, characters, you see actors play a character that dies on screen, and sometimes you still see like a little twitch in their eye or something. It's got to be incredibly difficult to look dead while your eyes are open. Because your eyes are going to focus on stuff.
But like you said, to have that moment of my eyes are still open and I'm fine, there's no cutaway, and then you're dead. Like, how do you do that?
Right. You just see the life go out of his eyes. I was amazed by that performance. Anyway,
maybe
I interrupted you. Continue.
Since he's probably had hundreds of death scenes, maybe he just got that good at it.
He's a pro.
Died so many times. All right. The next segment is mine, and this will bring home why I included that sequence as not vengeful forces, but as part of the ordeal.
Okay.
So the next segment is reward. Having faced his worst fear, the hero seizes the object of his quest. This segment is why I say the ordeal continues. There are two rewards here. Well, multiple rewards. The one is they recapture Wade. 2, this is the first time where Dan earns the respect of his son. When they arrive in contention, Dan starts to give William an order, and he complies without question. He sees his father in a new light now, and they have this great moment where, you know, his son's riding off to go keep an eye on the railhead, and Dan calls his name, and he turns, and there's no dialogue, but he nods at him, and the kid, like, it's a great little no dialogue moment. So that, to me, that's the most distinct reward.
Absolutely agree.
We don't immediately see it, but Dan has earned Wade's respect as well.
Yep.
And I think that's part of the reward as well.
Yeah.
So that's the ultimate boon.
Fully agree. That's exactly what I've got.
How gonna hang me in the morning?
That ends Act 2.
We're gonna hop on a train and we'll be right back.
Hey, Jeff.
Hey.
Did you know that there's a legend and a rumor? When you take the 310 to Yuma, you can see the ghosts of outlaws riding by.
I did not know.
In the sky. Way up high.
What is that from?
That is from the 1957 version of 310 to Yuma. That's the theme song.
I wonder why they omitted it from this fine remake.
So with that, I pass the ceremonial beverage bag across the table.
Oh, it's heavy.
To you.
The ceremonial beverage bag is heavy.
Pleased to be enjoying its contents.
Stolen whiskey. Aged 11 years. American whiskey barrel finished with smoke oak staves. 46% alcohol by volume, 92 proof, 750 milliliters. This is stolen American whiskey. We are firm believers in you can't rush greatness, which is why we waited 11 long years before we pulled our whiskey out of the barrel. Thanks to our patience, we now have a true American whiskey. Stolen because he steals. He's a stealer.
Because he's a stealer.
Perfect. The label.
I like the label.
It looks as though it's handwritten and a bunch of stuff has been like redacted hastily with a Sharpie. What is that about?
Yeah. I think it's meant to be they're scribbling out the original label of the whiskey, and they've written their own label on top of it.
American whiskey, structurally complex, rich in color, with a delightfully creamy mouthfeel. I've never, and who's ever had enough creamy mouthfeel? And if that wasn't enough, we took it a step further and added a keen finish with wood-fired smoke barrel staves, giving it that extra kick over the top. Drink it like it's stolen. Let's do this.
Now, I watched the Whiskey Vault episode where they sampled this.
Yeah.
And according to them, the two fellas that started this, Jamie Duff and Roger Holmes. Sorry, Jamie, I don't know if that's a fella. It could be a lady. But anyway, they started this company in their apartment in New Zealand, making whiskey in their apartment.
All right.
And kind of got their start making smoked rum and then switched to whiskey. I say we give this a try.
Are you getting new glass? Dan's getting new glasses. He's like, we're not going to try to rinse. We're getting new, fresh whiskey tasting.
Because this is a Western, we have to have the
bullet. Of course.
We have to have the glasses with the bullet embedded
bullet glasses.
in it.
Oh, it's got this really cool little, like a ribbon.
Ah. What was the secondary blop?
I almost spilled it. All right, I'm putting some.
Okay, I'm going to fill mine to the top.
All right. You're going to give yourself a Brad Pitt pour?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is...
What does this look like?
It's kind of dark.
More amber than the 100-year-old Jack Daniels that we just
it's got more
had an hour ago.
Yeah, it's not as pale.
Yeah, there's definitely a richer gold.
It definitely leaves residue when you tip the glass. Does that mean it's sugar? What does that mean?
Yeah, high alcohol, high sugar, but it's whiskey, so it has to be at least 40. What did you say this was? 46?
Yeah.
Yes, 46.
Yeah.
So it's 92 proof.
It's lighter and less complex than the 100-year-old Jack Daniels was.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time picking out
I can't pin it.
A scent. There's something slightly like wildflowery about it.
Huh, yeah.
Like, you know those scents if you're out hiking and every now and then you get this little whiff of floral something.
I don't get smoky, though. I don't smell smokiness. I'm going to taste it.
No, I'm not smelling smoke. Now that burns.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's even better coming back
That
up.
one burns way more than the I was unprepared for that.
I'm glad I didn't take a shot of it. That is...
Okay, so what does that taste like? That is...
It's got that wildflower thing that you mentioned.
Yeah.
I don't taste the smoke, though. And that was like something they're smoking aged barrel oak staves.
Is it like coffee almost?
There's almost a cinnamon to it.
Cinnamon coffee flour.
Yeah. It's the cinnamon coffee flour.
It's good, though.
I ain't complaining.
Interesting.
Well, I think as we continue to sip our stolen whiskey,
which we paid full price for,
let's continue with Act 3.
Act 3 begins with the road back. The hero is pursued by vengeful forces he disturbed when he seized the sword, when he was awarded the reward. We're back in sync with this.
Okay, good.
Our ultimate boon and all that was all the same. So road back after checking into the Contention Hotel. Dan sees some rain clouds over Bisbee, and Ben Wade comments on it and says, "You still need that $200, Dan?"
Oh, what a
calling Dan's motivation into question. He's, if you're in this for the money, Bisbee's getting rain, which means you're going to get grass, which means your cows are going to have something to eat, and troubles are over. Because I don't know if we stated, but there's been a 3-year drought that these folks have been suffering through. Charlie Prince and the gang are on the trail. They reach the railroad construction area where they're blasting through the tunnels and kill Mr. Bowles and Luke Wilson and the big bearded fella who got a shovel to the face, and recover Ben Wade's gun. Ben, back at the hotel, tries to bribe Dan to let him go.
What are you going to do with your $200 now, Dan, now that the rains are coming?
People money, Wade. That drought left me in the hole.
Well, what do you think about double that amount? You can pay your debts, buy 100 more cows, build a new barn.
Well, how you reckon I'm going to do that?
Just lay down your gun and let me walk out the door. It's worth $400 to me.
Is that what you reckon my price is?
No. No, I reckon it's $1,000. $1,000. Now, there's 10 times that amount on Butterfield's coach.
Oh, yeah.
You want my cut, Dan? It's all yours.
$1,000 would solve all of Dan's problems. That would set up somebody like him for a long period of time.
Yeah.
This is a guy who says that when he hires out to work somewhere for a day, he gets paid $2.
Yeah.
So being offered $1,000 is a couple years worth of earnings. But Dan maintains his resolve. He tells Ben to shut up and stop talking to him for a while. So he's sticking with this. This isn't about money.
Yeah.
This is about justice and righteousness. He's said, maybe I don't like the thought of men like you running around wild.
Yeah. I just want to put a little Campbell in there. I hope I'm not stealing
No,
your thunder.
go ahead. I will take this opportunity to sip some stolen whiskey.
I took a sip, and I got the vanilla this time. And then the burn, I thought I was going to lose some of it. This Wade offering him $1,000 is a little bit... yeah, right? It burns.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit of a delayed woman is temptress, tempting him with the money.
I wondered about how you were going to get that in, because you're always really good at picking out the goddess moments and things like that. And I just didn't see any of it here.
They're in the bridal suite, and Wade comments as he's lying on the bed looking up the ceiling, I wonder how many brides have taken in that view.
As he's looking up at the ceiling.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
That's
and then
great.
when Dan refuses, Wade says, "You mean we're still not friends?"
Right.
Come 5 minutes to 3, we're going to be a hell of a lot closer than you think.
Yep.
Another foreshadowing moment.
Mr. Butterfield then arrives with a marshal and 2 deputies. This is some extra guns on their side to help walk Ben Wade to the train station.
Mm-hmm.
And these look like serious men.
Yep.
And then Wade's gang arrives in contention in a thunder of horse hooves. And Charlie Prince hollers out to the townspeople that they will give $200 cash to anyone who shoots one of Ben Wade's captors. And there's this really great scene of you hear all these people going, "Oh, give me the money, I'll do it."
Yeah.
And Charlie says, "Well, you got to shoot him first."
Yeah, it's so good.
He's sinister. I love Charlie Prince.
What a
terrifying.
What a great move.
Yeah. Brilliant move. These guys have money to spare. Plus, as we see, they're not really probably going to hold up their end of the bargain.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But this move attracts as somebody here. Now, here I am forgetting the detail. I don't know if it's Mr. Butterfield or someone's looking out the window and says, "Oh, there's 30 or 40 extra guns out there."
Yeah.
As all these townsfolk, men and women, are strapping on their 6-shooters and crowding around the hotel waiting to shoot anybody standing next to Ben Wade.
Yeah.
And the marshal and his deputies...
Oh, to hell with this.
Now, just a minute, Marshal.
Look, if it's a fair fight, well, sure. I'd stay for that. A fair fight, that's a man's duty, but there's only 5 of us. Sorry, mister, but I'm not going to die here today. And neither are my men.
So the marshal and his deputies surrender and are immediately gunned down on the porch of the hotel by Charlie Prince and the rest of Ben Wade's gang. And this was an interesting moment, I thought, for the filmmakers. James Mangold said that the original script called for the marshal and the deputies to just walk away. And that's what happens in the original 1957 version. It's not a marshal and deputies. It's just 5 dudes that volunteer, but then they surrender and walk away. But somebody on set said, "Hey, we've got a problem now. These are a couple of, these are 3 lawmen. What happens when they get to the train station? If they're still in town, shouldn't they be involved somehow?" And so James Mangold decided, okay, well, we have to kill him then. So right then and there on set, they rewrote it and shot the murder of the marshal and the deputies.
I love it.
They just resolved that situation. Well, okay, we got to kill him.
Yeah.
So like within 15 minutes, he said they like reset everything and then loaded all the gang's pistols with blanks and roll them. This is all vengeful forces.
Yeah.
Right? Ben Wade then tries to convince Dan and Will to give up. It's just you now.
Yep.
And Mr. Butterfield, he's going to come upstairs and he's going to walk out on you. And Will tries to save it, tries to tell Ben, "You're not all that bad." It's like, this is the Luke Skywalker to Darth Vader. There's still good in you. I see it.
Yeah.
But nuh-uh. Ben Wade says, "I wouldn't last 5 minutes leading that outfit of rabid dogs if I wasn't rotten as hell."
Yeah.
Mr. Butterfield, just as Ben Wade predicted.
I can't do it, Dan. And if I can't do it, you shouldn't do it either.
They say discretion is the better part of valor.
If you think you have an obligation to me or to the railroad, I assure you, you do not. I am releasing you.
It's just you left, Dan. Just you and your boy.
And Dan is not giving up. There's this moment where Dan says,
You know, this whole ride, it's been nagging on me. That's what the government gave me for my leg. $198.36. And the funny thing is that when you think about it, which I have been lately, was they weren't paying me to walk away. They were paying me so they could walk away.
and so now he is turning this back on Mr. Butterfield, and he says, you're going to take my son home. You're going to give my wife $1,000 cash if I get Ben Wade on that train. And Mr. Butterfield says, yep, I'll do it. And in a moment that I thought was representative of the relationship that Ben and Dan have formed, he looks to Ben Wade as the witness to that gentleman's agreement.
Yeah.
He says, did you hear it? And Ben Wade says, yep, I heard it. And I believe that were it to come down to somebody's word against Mr. Butterfield's, I believe that Ben Wade would hold up his end of that bargain.
Yeah.
I think he would argue in favor and say, no, I heard him say it.
Yeah.
And darn it, if he didn't get me on that train, you owe the Evans family $1,000.
Fits in his code. Yeah.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
And part of the other part of that agreement is for Hollander, the landowner, to let the water flow again on the land. And for people like Tucker, who's no longer with us now, but whatever thug replaces Tucker, to not be allowed to step foot on Evans' land again. That, to me, was the end of the road back.
Oh, hell no.
No?
No.
Then continue from your perspective. Yeah.
Okay. Dan takes Wade out of the hotel, and immediately people start firing on them. And they just make it across the alley and into a shop.
Well, hang on.
Yeah.
There's the conversation of Dan and William, where Dan gives William his mother's brooch that he was gonna hawk, and he says, "Give this to your mother.
Go with Butterfield. Do what he says. Give it to your mother.
And if something happens to me, if I don't make it through this, then you're the man of the house,
right?
And you can do it, and I believe in you because you have the best parts of me."
Yeah.
And William says, I don't want to go, Dad. I don't want to leave you. It's not that I want to hang out with Ben Wade some more. He says, I don't want to leave you. I kind of saw that as part of the next segment.
Okay, I don't, but
okay, go ahead and I'll backtrack maybe.
I can see how that's a resurrection. But let me just dive through. They make it out of this impossible situation, and they're getting shot at, and Wade is sort of playing along. They get into this shop. And finally, Wade says, I'm not doing this anymore, Dan. I'm not going to run through the streets and get shot at. I'm done. And he stands up and goes, hey, Charlie, stop firing. Hold your fire. And Dan jumps on him and takes him to the ground, and they wrestle. And Wade gets the upper hand and is choking Dan out with his handcuffs. And Dan says,
I had never been no hero, Wade. Only battle I seen. We was in retreat. My foot got shot off by one of my own men. You try telling that story to your boy. See how he looks at you then.
It just has this impact on Wade, and he lets him go and says, all right. And now he sort of decides he'll go with Dan to the train. It's this decision like, all right, now you and I are going to I'm going to play along. So now the fire is super heavy, and William gets the jump on Butterfield and goes after his dad. William escapes from the hotel, runs away from Butterfield, and he's chasing.
Right.
It's such a great chase sequence, and it's a great example of vengeful forces. The bad guys chase Wade and Dan all the way to the train depot.
Mm-hmm.
As they're about to go into the train depot building, Charlie wings Dan, and Wade pulls him inside. And they have this,
Wade pulls him inside.
Yeah, he pulls him inside, and then they have this great conversation.
He ain't stubborn.
Excuse me?
He said I was stubborn for keeping my family on a dime ranch. It's my son, Mark. The young one. He got tuberculosis. when he was 2, the doctor said he'd die if he didn't have a dry climate. So
why are you telling me this?
I don't know. I guess I just wanted you to know that I ain't stubborn, is all.
Like you said at the beginning, this is kind of a buddy cop movie.
Yeah.
Sort of. Not buddy cop, but it's a buddy movie.
Yeah.
And that I think was the culmination of it. Dan wants Ben to like him. That's why he tells him that story. I just didn't want you to think I was stubborn.
Yeah. Well,
anyway.
In any case, the train arrives, but Dan and Wade are still pinned down. And then William opens the gate, releases the cattle, starts firing his gun. So now the cattle are covering the gap between the depot and the train. That is what I saw that whole sequence as the road back.
Whoa.
Because it's leading up to this moment.
Holy smokes. All that was included in your road back.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That run to the train station, that's the Death Star Trench attack.
So where would you put that?
That's part of the resurrection. That's the final battle of good versus evil in the movie, which is what that segment is. It's oddly named, I think. Vogler calls it Resurrection. The point I'm making is that at this point in the story, this segment is the final battle.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think the Death Star Trench Run is a very well-known representation of it, which is why I'm calling it out here as a comparison.
I get it. Let me just do Resurrection.
Sure.
And then, so Resurrection, the hero is purified by death, either in a literal or symbolic way, and returns to the land of the living a changed person. So Dan gets Wade to the truck. That's the end of the chase sequence. The chase is over. He gets him to the truck. Wade even congratulates him. He's so transformed. He says, yeah, you did it. And then he looks up and says, no. And Charlie is there, and he shoots Dan 1, 2, 3, 4 times.
Yeah.
And Wade hops out of the train, and even Charlie says,
For a one-leg rancher, he's one tough son of a.
So even Dan has earned Charlie's respect. So Charlie tosses Wade his guns, and then Wade shoots Charlie dead, and then shoots every one of the rest of his crew.
Right.
Holy crap. Wade is
what
transformed, right? Wade is transformed in that moment.
Yes.
He's sort of played along, but now he has taken the side against his allies. He has changed sides.
Right.
He's resurrected as a moral human being. And William runs to his dad and says, you done it, Pa. You done it. You got him on the train. In an echo of what Dan said to Doc Potter as Potter was dying.
Yes.
So Dan...
And they have the same smile.
Yeah.
They both smile and then die.
And Dan is purified by death.
Right.
His sins, he's achieved exactly what he said he would, and he's gotten the respect. Well, I won't go on because that's part of Return with the Elixir, but to me, that's the moment of resurrection.
Agreed.
Bing!
Yeah, I think it's just where we chose to draw the line between the road back and the resurrection is different, but our ultimate point of resurrection is absolutely the same.
Good.
We've been talking a little bit about father-son relationships throughout this episode, and the only reason I'm mentioning this now, I don't see it as a part of the journey itself. It just takes place during this point of the movie, but it struck me, and that is, we alluded to it earlier, where there's like Charlie and Ben have a father-son or mentor and student, or you maybe suggested a little, like Charlie's got a little crush on Ben or something. That it was just something about his performance that made you feel that way, but
you forgot what he'd done for us.
Right, which I see. He just sees Ben. He holds Ben on a pedestal. That's all?
There's just
I don't know.
I have no evidence for it other than there's something in Ben Foster's performance that.
Okay, but what struck me is that when Dan and Ben are running across the rooftops, the way Charlie calls out "boss" sounds just like a kid calling for dad.
But
It's high-pitched. It's a little frantic. It sounds like a kid who's lost his dad in the mall, and he's going, Dad!
Yeah.
Dad! That's what it sounded like. And I don't know, not part of the journey, but
yeah.
It is part of the...
Atonement with the father is absolutely part of the journey. And
well,
I think that's some of that.
It could be that, yeah. I guess we've caught up. There was a lot of resurrection that we kind of glossed over, or at least I put it in resurrection. You didn't mention it at all, which is the conversation between Ben and Dan in the hotel room before they get up and leave. That is when Ben tells Dan about the one time that he read the Bible.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit of an explanation of how Ben came to be the way he is.
Yeah.
Also, you see him writing in a book, and you don't know what book it is, and you don't know what he's doing, although you've seen him draw twice, so we know he's drawing something probably. And in the middle of the chase to the train station, Will gets up and he looks at the book, and A, it's the Bible, and B, Ben has drawn a portrait of Dan sitting in the chair with the shotgun over his leg, looking out the hotel window. This is, I think, an absolute expression of respect and admiration for Dan, because one, he admired that bird at the beginning. He definitely admired the woman in the saloon. I think her name is Emmy. And then the third drawing we see is of Dan. All things that he thought were beautiful. Other than that, I think we're in sync. So that brings us to the freedom to live, or return with the elixir. The hero, having won some precious treasure or reward, now returns to the ordinary world to share the spoils of battle. You mentioned Charlie in the previous segment, but I thought Charlie expressing, for a one-leg rancher, he's one tough son of a bitch, that expression of respect was a little return with the elixir.
Oh, yeah.
Even the baddest of the bad guys showed some respect to Dan Evans. Okay, so here's my problem with this segment then, is that I feel like we've already discussed so much of this stuff in Resurrection. So what's left? I've got William saying, you done it, Pa, which means, and we see Butterfield witness Ben climb up into the train at the end of the film. So he knows he now has to pay the Evans family $1,000.
Sure.
Get Hollander to leave them alone and whatnot. So I suppose there's a little freedom to live there. There's the Evans family is going to be okay. They're going to be cared for with Dan having done what he did.
Yeah. I mean, the spoils of battle here,
yes,
literally is Dan is owed the bounty for Wade, which
right.
William will take back to his mother, and they'll save the ranch.
Yes.
But I think the real elixir here is love and respect. That's
right.
what Dan wanted, and he earned it from everyone he cared about.
Yeah, even people he didn't expect to care about.
Right, and then you're right, Wade gets on the train of his own accord.
Yeah, with a gun in his hand.
Yep.
And then he rolls it up and hands it to whoever that person is in the train car.
See, I'd expect you to know his first, middle, and last name and his rank, but...
It was Doug Stevens.
See, I knew it.
He's a deputy train marshal.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Dan gets the gold and he gets the respect, and his son going to take care of his family now.
Yeah, I feel like Will was tempted by the light and the dark, and even though he watched his father die in front of him, watched his father sacrifice everything to do the right thing, I think that's going to have an effect on William. He's going to grow up a good man, not be further tempted by the dark side.
And probably...
That was Ben Wade.
Yeah.
Also, then, the question is, and I wrote this down, what do you think Ben Wade does next? As that train is
does
rolling
he break
away,
out of prison? That
train is rolling away. He whistles for his horse.
Yep.
So, obviously, he hops off the train.
Yeah.
He has waited long enough for Butterfield to see him get on it.
Yep.
And then once they're around the corner, he's probably going to break out, jump on his horse, and ride away. But what does he do then?
Yeah.
He's killed his entire gang.
Well, he goes to Mexico. Like he told.
Probably.
He goes to Mexico, goes to Zihuatanejo, and he meets Morgan Freeman.
That's probably what he does, right? Because when he's in Bisbee with the woman at the saloon. He asks her to jump out the back window. Let's ride across the border to Mexico. I'm not wanted there. I know a nice little place, and they'd pay to hear you sing.
Yeah.
Like, he wants to start over. He's tired of being a gangster. You see it in the movie. He doesn't really take part in the activities of his gang. He's their leader.
Yeah.
But he just like sets them loose like a pack of dogs.
Yeah.
And they do their thing, and then he takes his cut of the money.
Yeah. I did have an echo at the end. Wade cries, "No," and gets out of the train and shoots Charlie. He tells Alice at the beginning, "I hope I can get your husband back to you safe." And he doesn't.
No.
That wraps up this episode. We hope you'll come back next time when we cover...
Oh, shoot. We didn't talk about that.
Check out the Patreon page to find out. Visit patreon.com/heroesjourney and join as a mentor sponsor to gain ability to vote.
If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. Tell 5 friends about us. A little dog and pony show like this survives on word of mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And be like 49 of your fellow listeners and give us a 5-star rating.
Dan, can we take a moment to thank all the members of our posse?
Yeah.
We have been doing this Patreon thing for a year. A year, wow. And I know we call out every sponsor when they join, but I think everyone deserves another mention.
Yeah, maybe we'll go alphabetical by first name.
Boom.
Adam Baxter. Our gladiator Dean Corvus Yarfire Ethington. Erica Garvin. I feel like a principal at high school graduation.
Yeah, except you're pronouncing the names correctly, so.
Oh, Evan Giannis.
There you go, Evan Jones. Right.
Evan Jones. The rookie, Jeffrey Scott.
Fresh fish.
John Peterson Jr. Dr. Lisa Carlson.
Melanie Nelson. The lovable and business-oriented halfling rogue Scott Iscoval Oak Grove Sanford. Tasha Finken. The best barkeep this side of the Mississippi.
Boy, howdy.
And Warren Baker. Thank you all so much for your support. We understand as much as anyone the deep thought that governs how you use the money you work so hard to earn, and we are so grateful that you think enough of our show to send some of yours our way. Dan and I put a lot of work into this show on top of our regular jobs, and your recognition of that effort means a lot to us.
Yeah, some podcasts have an entire crew of audio engineers and editors and all kinds of people, and the Hero's Journey is produced entirely by just the 2 of us.
Yep.
We are grateful to musician Taylor Jordan for composing and performing our theme music. Learn more about Taylor and his work at dramatics.net. That's dramatics with an X. Thank you to Demigod's sponsor Dean Ethington for designing our logo.
The X-Gas.
You can view Dean's public portfolio at daedesign.com. And in this episode, we sampled Stolen Whiskey. And I'm going to sample some more of it while you say the next line.
Stop what you're doing. Whip out your phone and follow us on Twitter at Heroes Podcast. Like us on Facebook.com/Heroes Journey Podcast. And make comments like, OMG, best podcast ever. So friends of your friends will be compelled by FOMO to give us a try. And check out our show notes, including links to what we're reading, watching, playing, and drinking at heroesdirtypodcast.com.
310 to Yemen is copyright 2000. All right, 310 to Yuma is copyright 2007 Relativity Media.
Until next time,
journey on! That was terrible.
Gonna journey.
Gonna journey in the morning. Journey on.
They're gonna hang me in the morning before the night is done. Hang me in the morning, never see the sun.